You're nothing without me, Rita. And soon, you'll see that for yourself.
The last words of my ex-husband still echoed in my head as I sat on a cold bench near a small grocery store, watching people pass by. No one noticed me. I felt invisible. Transparent. Only 3 months ago, I had been the wife of a successful businessman, living in a 3-story house with panoramic windows and driving a white Range Rover. And now? Now I was digging through trash bins, searching for food. My name is Margaret Carter, I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything, and gained far more than I ever imagined. But let's start from the beginning. 8 years ago, I met Victor Caldwell. I was 20, and I had just buried my parents. They were killed in a car accident on the highway. 1 second, and my entire life collapsed. I was completely alone, no brothers, no sisters, no one. Victor appeared like salvation. He was 2 years older, confident, successful, full of plans for the future. He hugged me at the funeral and said, "I'll take care of you. I promise." And I believed him. Before we go on, tell us what city you're watching from. We love to know where our stories reach. We got married 6 months later. I quit my job at a marketing agency. Victor insisted that the wife of a successful man shouldn't work. "You'll take care of the house, and I'll take care of us both," he said. And I agreed. How foolish I was. The first few years felt like a fairy tale. Victor opened a chain of car dealerships, and money flowed endlessly. We traveled, dined in expensive restaurants, I wore designer dresses. But gradually, I began to notice that none of it truly belonged to me. The house was in his mother's name. The car, under his sister's. Even the credit cards were his. I had nothing of my own. Not a single penny. When I tried to talk about it, Victor smirked. "Why do you need money? You have everything. Or don't you trust me?" I stayed silent. Because I was afraid of being alone. Again. And then Alyssa appeared. 23, model looks, long legs, and ambitions taller than skyscrapers. She came to one of Victor's new dealership openings, and the moment I saw the way he looked at her, and how she smiled back, I knew something was wrong. I was right. 2 months later, Victor filed for divorce. "I don't love you anymore," he said calmly, as if he were discussing buying a new car. "You've become boring. Alyssa is different. She's ambitious, bright, she inspires me. Victor, we've been together 8 years. I barely recognized my own voice. I gave up everything for you. And that was your mistake, Rita. No one asked you to quit your job. You chose to be a housewife." He hired the best lawyers in the city. I didn't even have money for a decent attorney. The public defender the court appointed showed up hungover and yawned while Victor's lawyers methodically destroyed every hope I had left. The house? Registered under his mother's name. The car? His sister's. Joint savings? None. All the money was in the business, which wasn't even under Victor's name but in others. Alimony? We had no children, so nothing there either. Compensation for years of marriage? The judge looked at me coldly. You didn't work, therefore, you didn't contribute to the household income. I walked out of the courtroom with nothing. Literally nothing. I had a backpack with a few clothes, a phone with a cracked screen, and 10 pounds in my pocket. "No one wants a homeless woman, Rita," Victor said as he stopped his brand new Porsche next to me while I walked down the street. Alyssa sat in the passenger seat, touching up her lipstick without even glancing at me. "Remember that. You're nobody. You have nothing. And you never will." He drove off, and I stood there on the sidewalk, feeling something inside me finally shatter for good. For the first week, I stayed with Irene, the only friend who didn't turn her back on me after the divorce. Everyone else disappeared the moment they realized I was no longer Mrs. Caldwell. Irene owned a small cafe on the outskirts of the city and let me sleep on a couch in the storage room. During the day, I helped her, washing dishes, cleaning, serving tables. In return, she fed me and gave me a roof over my head. But after 3 weeks, Irene started having problems with her landlord. He doubled the rent, and she was barely getting by. "I'm so sorry, Rita," she said through tears. "I can't keep doing this. I'll lose my place soon too." "I understand," I said, hugging her. "Thank you for everything." And just like that, I was back on the street. The first night was the worst. I found a bench in Hyde Park, away from the streetlights, wrapped myself in my thin jacket, and tried to sleep. Every noise, every voice made me flinch. I was terrified someone would approach me, hurt me. But no one did. People just passed by, as if I didn't exist. By the end of the first week, I already knew where to find food. Supermarkets threw out expired goods that were still edible. A bakery on Kensington High Street tossed away yesterday's bread every evening. Near the UCL student halls, I could always find something. Students often threw away leftovers. I learned to be quick and invisible. Learned not to look people in the eye so I wouldn't see pity or disgust. Learned to fall asleep sitting, leaning against the wall of a shopping center where the vents blew warm air. My phone had long since died, there was nowhere to charge it. And who could I even call? Irene, just to make her feel guiltier? Victor, so he could laugh at me again? After 3 weeks, I realized I had stopped feeling shame. When I dug through trash bins, I no longer cared who saw me. Hunger was stronger than pride. It was an ordinary October day, chilly, gray, and drizzling. I sat on a bench near a small grocery store, wrapping myself tighter in my soaked jacket and trying to warm my hands with my breath. People hurried out of the shop with full bags, rushing to their cars, hiding from the rain under umbrellas. Ordinary life. The kind I used to have. "Excuse me," a woman's voice said, carrying a light accent. I looked up. In front of me stood a woman in her 50s, wearing a tailored gray coat and holding an expensive leather handbag. Well-groomed, elegant, definitely not the kind of person who usually approaches the homeless. "Are you Margaret Carter?" she asked. I froze. No one had called me by my name in weeks. I nodded, unable to speak. The woman smiled. There was something warm, almost motherly, in that smile. "My name is Jennifer Stone. I'm an attorney with an international law firm based in Los Angeles. I've been looking for you for over a month." "A month? Why would a lawyer from America spend a month searching for me?" I don't understand," I managed to say. "Let's sit down somewhere," Jennifer suggested, nodding toward a small cafe across the street. "You need to dry off and warm up, and I have something very important to tell you." I wanted to refuse. Pride was still fighting somewhere deep inside, but cold, hunger, and curiosity were stronger. I nodded and followed her. Inside, it was warm and smelled of freshly baked pastries. I sat by the window while Jennifer ordered 2 cappuccinos and sandwiches. When the waitress brought them, I could barely stop myself from devouring the food, but I forced myself to eat slowly, with dignity. "At least now." "Margaret," Jennifer said, pulling a folder of documents from her bag. "Did you know your cousin, Mr. Samuel Miller?" "Uncle Samuel?" I frowned, trying to remember. My parents used to mention him occasionally, but that was long ago. He had moved to America before I was born. I think my father said they kept in touch for a while, but after my parents died, I never thought I had any relatives left. "Barely," I said. "He emigrated a long time ago." "My father was his cousin." "Exactly," Jennifer nodded. "Mr. Miller moved to the States 45 years ago. He built a successful real estate business in Los Angeles. He was never married, had no children. 3 months ago, he passed away from a heart attack. He was 72. I felt a wave of sadness for this man I barely knew. But what did that have to do with me? Before he died, Jennifer continued, Mr. Miller made a will. He hired private investigators to find you. He knew about your parents' deaths, about your marriage and divorce. And he decided to leave his estate to you. I blinked. An inheritance? Me? What kind of inheritance? My voice came out hoarse. Jennifer opened the folder and took out several documents. A mansion in Beverly Hills valued at $12 million, a red Ferrari 812 Superfast worth about $400,000, and financial assets totaling $50 million. I must have looked completely stunned. 50 million? A mansion? A Ferrari? This must be some kind of mistake, I whispered. No mistake, Margaret, Jennifer said gently. I personally brought these documents from Los Angeles. You are the sole heir of Mr. Samuel Miller. But, she paused, there's one condition. Of course. There's always a condition. What is it? I asked, my heart pounding. You must move to Los Angeles and live there for at least 1 year. During that time, you'll have to personally manage your uncle's company, a luxury real estate agency. If, after 1 year, you prove capable of running the business, the entire inheritance becomes permanently yours. If not, it will be donated to charity. I sat there, trying to process everything. Run a company? Me? I'd been a housewife for the past 8 years, a woman who'd spent 3 weeks digging through trash for food. But I don't know how to run a business, I said quietly. Mr. Miller knew that, Jennifer replied kindly. That's why the company already has an experienced team in place to help you, a mentor, accountants, managers. You'll just need to learn and make key decisions. Your uncle believed in you. He even wrote in his will, my niece Margaret has lost too much. Let her have a chance to start over and prove to everyone, especially herself, what she's truly capable of. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even noticed. Uncle Samuel, a man I hardly remembered, was giving me a chance. A chance I hadn't had in a very long time. What do I need to do? I asked, wiping my eyes. Jennifer smiled. First, take a shower, sleep in a real bed, and eat a proper meal. I've booked a hotel room for you. Tomorrow, we'll handle the paperwork, get you a new passport, I assume your old one's lost somewhere, and in 3 days, we'll fly to Los Angeles. A new life is waiting for you, Margaret. A new life. I looked out the window. A white Range Rover, the same model I used to drive, passed by on the street. Behind the wheel sat a woman in sunglasses, chatting on the phone with her friend in the passenger seat. They were laughing, carefree, happy. Just that morning, I had thought my life was over. That I would forever remain that homeless woman no one noticed. And now, in front of me lay a ticket to a completely different reality. I agree, I said firmly. I'll go to Los Angeles. And you know what? That was only the beginning. Because what awaited me ahead was so unbelievable that even now, looking back, it feels like it happened to someone else. But I'll tell you everything in time, and I promise, the ending will surprise you. Maybe even shock you. The hotel where Jennifer took me was the kind Victor and I used to visit on weekends. 4 stars, a marble lobby, polite doormen in uniforms. When I entered, the receptionist gave me a look full of poorly disguised contempt. My dirty jacket, tangled hair, and the smell of the street made me an unwelcome guest. But Jennifer said something in a cold, firm tone, and his expression changed instantly. I'm terribly sorry, Miss Carter, he mumbled, handing me a key card. Room 307. Enjoy your stay. I went up to the 3rd floor and opened the door. The room was simple, but after 3 weeks on the street, it felt like a palace. A large bed with crisp white sheets, a TV, a desk, and most importantly, a bathroom with hot water. I undressed and stepped into the shower. The hot water washed away the dirt, the exhaustion, the fear. I stood there crying until the water turned cold. Then I wrapped myself in a soft bathrobe, lay down on the bed, and fell asleep instantly. I woke up to a knock on the door. It was already dark outside. When I opened it, Jennifer was standing there with several shopping bags. "I hope you rested well," she smiled. "I brought you clothes and everything you might need. Try them on, please. We have an important day tomorrow." Inside the bags were jeans, a sweater, underwear, sneakers, cosmetics, even a hairdryer. Everything was new, and everything fit me perfectly. "How did you know my size?" I asked in surprise. "The investigators who found you compiled a complete dossier," Jennifer explained calmly. "Don't worry, it's standard procedure. Mr. Miller wanted to be sure they located the right person." The next day, we started handling the paperwork. It turned out my passport was still with me, crumpled and worn at the bottom of my backpack. Jennifer took me to a notary, then to a bank, and finally to the U.S. Embassy in London to arrange my visa. Everywhere we went, people treated us with respect. Apparently, the name Miller carried weight in certain circles. 2 days later, I had an official packet of documents proving that I was the legal heir of Mr. Samuel Miller, along with a U.S. visa and a business-class plane ticket. "Ready for your new life?" Jennifer asked as we drove to the airport. I looked out the window at the passing city. Somewhere out there was Victor, living with Alyssa. Somewhere was Irene, still trying to save her cafe. Somewhere was the park bench where I had slept for weeks. "More than ready," I said. The flight took 12 hours with a layover in Frankfurt. I had never flown business class before, soft seats that turned into beds, kind flight attendants, delicious food. I stared out the window at the clouds, still unable to believe this was happening to me. We landed in Los Angeles early in the morning. The California sun was bright, the air warm, filled with the scent of the ocean. At the exit, a driver was waiting with a sign that read "Miss Carter." A black Mercedes with tinted windows stood nearby. "First, we'll stop by the company office," Jennifer said. "Your team is waiting for you. After that, I'll show you your new home." Home. I would have a home again. The Miller Premium Estates office was located in the heart of Beverly Hills, in an elegant building of glass and white stone. We went up to the 4th floor. I was nervous, not just because of meeting the team, but because of the professional jargon and legal procedures I didn't know yet. "Don't worry," Jennifer reassured me. "At first, you'll have an executive assistant, Anna, working with you. The company will pay for an intensive real estate onboarding and a business communication coach. In a few months, you'll be fully up to speed." In the conference room, around 10 people sat at a long table, men and women in business suits. "Everyone, this is David Harrison, the managing director and your mentor," Jennifer said, nodding toward a tall man in his 40s with a tan face and a kind smile. "He'll help you learn the business." "Nice to meet you, Margaret," David said, offering his hand. His handshake was firm, confident. "Samuel spoke about you often. We're all here to help you." The others introduced themselves one by one: Michelle, the financial director; Robert, the head of legal; Sarah, the sales director. Their names blurred together, their faces too, but none of them looked at me with pity or contempt. They were simply professionals, ready to work. "I'll do my best not to let you down," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "We believe in you," David replied gently. Samuel did too. And he was never wrong about people. After the meeting, Jennifer and the driver took me to Beverly Hills. We drove through winding streets lined with immaculate lawns and palm trees until the car stopped in front of tall wrought iron gates. "Welcome home," Jennifer said. The gates opened, and we drove onto the property. The two-story mansion was built from white stone, with columns, huge windows, and a wide terrace. In front stood a manicured lawn, flower beds, and a fountain. And in the garage, just as Jennifer had promised, was a red Ferrari. I stepped out of the car and just stood there, frozen. All of this was mine. Inside, the housekeeper Maria is waiting for you, Jennifer continued. She worked for Mr. Miller for 20 years and knows this house better than anyone. The refrigerator is full, the bed is freshly made, everything's ready for your arrival. Here are the keys to the house and the car. And this, she added, handing me a black bank card, is your account. There's $500,000 available for your daily expenses. The main inheritance funds will be transferred once you officially take charge of the company. $500,000. For daily expenses. Just a week ago, I'd been digging through trash bins for food. I'll leave you to settle in, Jennifer said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Tomorrow at 9, David will come by to pick you up. Your training begins then. Rest, Margaret. You've earned it. She got into the Mercedes, and the car drove away. I stood alone before the mansion that was now my home. The front door opened, and a woman in her mid-50s appeared, plump, kind-faced, with gray hair tied neatly in a bun. Miss Margaret, she asked with a strong Spanish accent. I'm Maria. Please, come in. I've prepared lunch. Inside, the mansion was even more beautiful. Marble floors, high ceilings, a sweeping staircase to the second floor. A living room with a massive sofa and a fireplace. A kitchen with an island and state-of-the-art appliances. Maria guided me through the rooms, explaining what was where. I nodded and smiled, but my mind struggled to process any of it. Finally, we went upstairs, and she opened the door to the master bedroom. This was Mr. Miller's room, she said softly. Now it's yours. A huge bed, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city, a walk-in closet the size of my old bedroom. On the nightstand stood a framed photo, 2 men, one younger, one slightly older, both smiling. That's Mr. Miller and your father, Maria explained. It was taken just before Mr. Miller left for America. He always kept it here. I picked up the frame. My father, young and happy. And beside him, the uncle I never knew, who had remembered his family even across 45 years and an ocean. Thank you, I whispered, though I wasn't sure to whom, Maria, Uncle Samuel, or fate itself. Maria quietly left the room, and I sat on the edge of the bed and began to cry again. But this time, they were not tears of despair, they were tears of relief. Of gratitude. Of hope. My new life had just begun. And ahead of me were challenges I couldn't even imagine yet. That first night in the mansion, I barely slept. I lay in the huge bed, wrapped in silk sheets, listening to the silence, unfamiliar, almost ringing. No car noises, no drunken shouts, no fear of someone approaching. Just quiet and softness. I got up several times, walking through the rooms, touching the furniture, the walls, checking if it was real. If I wasn't dreaming on some park bench, about to wake up aching all over. But no. It was real. In the morning, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee. Maria was already bustling around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, an omelette with vegetables, toast, fresh orange juice, fruit. I sat at the table, and a lump rose in my throat. Just a month ago, I'd been grateful to find a piece of stale bread in a trash can. Eat, Miss Margaret, Maria smiled. You need your strength. Today is an important day. At exactly 9, a silver Audi pulled up to the gate. David Harrison stepped out, wearing light-colored pants and a blue shirt, looking fresh and confident. Good morning, he greeted me. Ready for your first day at work? I nodded, though inside I was trembling with nerves. As we drove to the office, David told me about the company. Miller Premium Estate specializes in luxury real estate, he explained. We deal with properties priced from $5 million and up. Our clients are actors, producers, entrepreneurs, people who value discretion and quality. Samuel built the company's reputation over 30 years. We're not the biggest, but we're among the best. How many deals do you close per month? I asked, trying to understand the business. Usually 3 or 4 major ones. But the profit from a single $20 million mansion can cover the company's expenses for half a year. Samuel used to say, better to sell one house for $20 million than 10 for $1 million, less chaos, more quality. At the office, my new workspace was waiting, Mr. Miller's former office. A large dark wood desk, a leather chair, a panoramic window overlooking the city. On the walls hung photographs, Samuel receiving an award, Samuel with Hollywood celebrities, Samuel at the grand opening of a new office. He looked successful, confident, happy. He'd be proud of you, David said softly. You were the only family he had left. The first few days passed like a blur. David taught me the basics, how to assess property value, how to work with clients, how to read contracts, how to analyze the market. Michelle showed me the financial reports, and the numbers were astronomical. Sarah took me to viewings, enormous mansions with swimming pools, home theaters, wine cellars, and staff quarters. I tried to memorize everything, taking notes and asking questions. I was terrified of sounding foolish, but the team was patient and understanding. Within a week, I began to find my footing. I learned to read the documents, memorized the names of regular clients, and started to understand how luxury real estate pricing worked. The industry jargon stopped feeling overwhelming. Every evening I worked with a coach. During the day Anna, my assistant, helped with documents and meetings, and David patiently explained professional terms. Within 2 months, I was able to handle simple negotiations on my own. Each evening, I came back to the mansion exhausted but satisfied. Maria would prepare dinner, and we would chat in the kitchen. She often told me stories about Mr. Miller. He was a good man, she would say. He never yelled, always said thank you. He worked a lot, but he never forgot about people. Every Christmas, he gave everyone a bonus. And when my daughter got sick, he paid all the medical bills. Just like that. He never asked for anything in return. Listening to her, I realized that my uncle was the kind of person I wanted to become, strong yet kind, successful yet compassionate. A month passed. I felt more confident, began making decisions, taking part in negotiations. David praised my progress, saying I had a natural talent for the business. Maybe he exaggerated to encourage me, but I wanted to believe it was true. Then, one evening, as I was going through paperwork for a new deal in my office, my new phone, the one Jennifer had bought for me, started ringing. The number was unfamiliar, but the country code was British. I answered. Rita. The voice was painfully familiar. It's me, Irene. Irene. I hadn't heard her voice in so long. How on earth had she found my number? Irene. How are you? How's the cafe? I asked quickly. Rita, I got your number through mutual friends, she said, her voice trembling. You won't believe what's happened. Victor, he's lost everything. I froze. What? Yes. Turns out Alyssa used him. She convinced him to transfer half the business to her, supposedly to protect the assets. And then, she sold everything to some investor and disappeared. Took the money and ran. Victor's broke. His dealerships are shut down, the house was repossessed for debts. He's living with his mother in a 1-bedroom apartment and looking for work. I should have felt satisfaction. Triumph. Joy that the man who had destroyed my life was now facing justice. But instead, I felt empty. Victor had been part of my life for 8 years. Yes, he betrayed me. Yes, he left me homeless. But I couldn't rejoice in someone else's misery, not even his. "Rita, are you still there?" Irene asked. "I'm here," I said quietly. "How are you, Irene? How's the cafe?" "Barely holding on. My landlord raised the rent again. I don't know how long I can keep going," she sighed. "But that's not why I called. People here are saying that you left the country. Is it true?" "It's true," I said. "I'm in Los Angeles now." "It's a long story, Irene, really long. I'll tell you everything soon, but not over the phone. Give me your cafe's address, I'm going to send you some money." "What?" "Rita, no, I didn't call for that. Irene, you were the only one who helped me when I had nowhere to go. You gave me food and a roof over my head when you barely had enough for yourself. I'll never forget that. Please, let me help you now." There was a pause. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Rita. You have no idea how much this means right now." We said goodbye, and I immediately transferred $20,000 to her. For me, it was a small part of the $500,000 available on my account. For her, it was the salvation of her business. But I couldn't stop thinking about Victor. I lay in bed that night, remembering his words, "No one wants a homeless woman." Remembering how he laughed as he drove past me in his Porsche. Remembering how his lawyers stripped me of everything. And now, he was the one who'd lost it all. That night, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't bring joy. It's hollow. It doesn't give back the lost years or heal old wounds. Victor had received what he deserved, but that didn't make me any happier. What did make me happy was being able to help Irene. To be working, learning, waking up each morning in a warm bed, unafraid of tomorrow. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but the chance to live again. 3 months had passed since I arrived in Los Angeles. Slowly, I was transforming from a lost woman who didn't know how a business worked into someone who could negotiate with millionaires without trembling. David was an incredible mentor, patient yet demanding. He taught me how to read people, to understand what they truly wanted. In our business, David often said, "The house itself doesn't matter most. What matters is understanding the client's dream." Some buy a mansion to impress their friends. Some want to feel safe. Some are looking for a place to hide from the world. Your job is to uncover that dream and offer exactly what they need. My first independent deal was the sale of a villa to a film director from France. He was searching for a home for his family, his wife and 3 children. He wanted something peaceful, with a large garden and a pool, far from the noise. I showed him a mansion in Malibu, overlooking the ocean. The house was slightly over his budget, but I saw the way his eyes lit up when he stepped onto the terrace and watched the sunset above the water. I saw his children run through the garden, laughing, shouting with joy. And I knew, this was the house. We agreed on the price, I helped with the paperwork, and a month later the deal was closed. My commission came to $120,000. $120,000, for one house. Just 6 months earlier, I could never have dreamed of earning that much. David shook my hand and said, "Excellent work, Margaret. You've done wonderfully. Samuel would be proud." I don't know why, but those words made me cry. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe because someone had finally told me, after so many years, that I'd done well. That I was worth something. That evening, the team held a small celebration at the office. Michelle brought champagne, Sarah ordered pizza, and we sat in the conference room laughing, sharing stories. I felt like part of something again, part of a team. A family I had lost once and found again. But life, as always, couldn't stay perfect for long. One morning, as I sat on the terrace sipping coffee and reading the news on my tablet, Maria stepped outside and said, "Miss Margaret, you have a visitor." "A man. He says you know him." "A visitor?" I wasn't expecting anyone. Maybe David had decided to stop by early? I went downstairs, and froze. Standing awkwardly in the living room, shifting from foot to foot, was Victor. My ex-husband looked nothing like I remembered. Gone was the tailored suit, he now wore simple jeans and a jacket. The confident smile had vanished, replaced by a dull, weary look. He seemed older, or maybe life had finally stripped away all the arrogance he once wore like armor. "Rita," he said quietly. "I'm sorry for coming without warning. I need to talk to you." I stared at him, the man who had destroyed my life. Who had left me on the streets. Who once told me I was nothing. And now he was standing in my house, asking to talk. "How did you find me?" I asked coldly. "Irene told me you were in America. I hired someone to track you down. Please, Rita, just give me 5 minutes." I could have thrown him out. I could have called the security patrol that watched over the neighborhood. I could have told him everything I'd bottled up inside all these months. But instead, I nodded. 5 minutes. No more. We sat in the living room. Victor looked around, and I saw the reflection of envy, regret, and disbelief in his eyes. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "I'm happy for you. Truly." "Get to the point," I interrupted. He exhaled and lowered his head. I messed up, Rita. Completely. Alyssa used me. She convinced me to transfer half the business to her, said it was for asset protection, and then she sold everything and disappeared. Took the money and ran off with some football player. Creditors came after me, partners sued me. I lost everything. The house, the cars, the company. Even my mother turned her back on me. She said I brought it on myself. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. "Rita, I know I have no right to ask for anything," he went on. "I know what I did to you was unforgivable. But I'm at rock bottom. I have nothing. No job, no money. I don't even know how to buy a ticket back home. I came here with the last bit of cash I borrowed from a friend." He looked up at me, and I saw a real desperation in his eyes, not the act, not the pride, just raw defeat. "I'm not asking you to take me back or to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. But please, help me get back on my feet. Lend me some money for a ticket, and maybe something small to start over. I'll pay you back. I promise. Even if it takes years." Silence filled the room. I looked at him, this man who had once thrown me away like garbage. The one who laughed as I fell. The one who said no one would ever want me. And now he was the one sitting before me, asking for help. I could have refused. I could have repeated his own words back to him. "No one wants a homeless man, Victor. Remember that." I could have watched him walk out with nothing. That would have been justice, right? But I remembered that night on the street, the cold, the fear, the loneliness. The feeling that you're nothing, that your life is over. And I knew I didn't want anyone else to feel that. Not even him. "I'll give you the money," I said calmly. "Not as a loan. I'm just giving it to you. $50,000. For a ticket home and a fresh start. But I want you to understand something." Victor raised his head, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "I'm not doing this because I've forgiven you," I continued. "And not because I still care. I'm doing this because I refuse to become like you. I won't destroy someone just because they once destroyed me. I don't want to be cruel. I want to be better." Tears streamed down his cheeks. Victor Caldwell, the man who never cried, who was always cold and untouchable, sat in my living room and wept. "Thank you," he rasped. "Thank you, Rita. I don't deserve this." "No, you don't," I agreed. "But everyone deserves a second chance. Use it well, Victor. And don't ever come back to me." I stood to show the conversation was over. Victor got up, too. He wanted to say something, but only nodded and left. Maria came over as the door closed behind him. "You're a kind woman, Miss Margaret," she said. "Mr. Miller would be proud of you." I smiled. "You know, Maria, I'm proud of myself, too." And it was true. After Victor's visit, I felt a strange relief, as if I'd finally closed the last chapter of my old life. I transferred the money to him, and he flew back home. He never reached out again, and that suited me. I didn't want to know what happened next. He'd been given a second chance, the rest was his responsibility. My life went on. I closed several more major deals, and David began trusting me with increasingly important properties. The agency was thriving, clients were happy, the team worked smoothly. I even started to enjoy the job, the negotiations, the showings, that moment when you see joy in the eyes of people who found their perfect home. But there was something else. Someone else. David Harrison. I didn't notice it at first. He was just my mentor, a professional teaching me the business. But our conversations gradually drifted beyond work. We started having lunch together not only to discuss deals but simply to talk about life, books, dreams. He told me about his childhood in Boston, about coming to Los Angeles 15 years ago with no money and no connections, about meeting Samuel, who believed in him and gave him a job. "Samuel saved my life," David said. I was nobody. Tending bar, thinking that was all I'd ever do. He saw potential in me. He trained me, gave me a chance. I'll never forget what he did. We sat on the terrace of a small cafe in Malibu as the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in orange and pink. "He did the same for me," I said quietly. "Gave me a second chance when I thought it was all over." David looked at me, and there was something warm in his eyes, almost tender. "You know, Margaret, I don't think Samuel chose you by accident. He saw things in people they couldn't see in themselves. He knew you'd make it. He knew you were strong." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "Sometimes I'm still scared, that I'll fail, that I'll let the team down, that this will all turn out to be a mistake." "That's normal," David said, placing his hand over mine. "Fear is part of growth. The key is not letting it run your life." His hand was warm, steady. And I didn't pull mine away. Something shifted between us after that. We didn't say it out loud, but we both felt it. Our glances lingered a little longer, our touches happened a little more often. After work, he'd walk me to my car, and we'd stand there talking about nothing in particular, just because we didn't want to part. One evening, when we stayed late at the office working through documents for a new project, David set the folder aside and looked at me, serious. "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you." My heart sped up. "I know it's complicated," he went on. "I'm your mentor. Technically, you're my boss. But I can't keep it to myself anymore. I like you. A lot. And it's not just a passing crush. I think about you all the time, when I wake up, when I fall asleep, even during client meetings. I'll understand if this is inappropriate. If you want us to keep things strictly professional, I will. But I had to say it. Otherwise, I'll lose my mind." I sat there, letting his words sink in. I liked David, too. I had from the start, though I kept telling myself it was gratitude, that I was confusing my feelings. But hearing him say it out loud, I knew the truth. It wasn't confusion. It was real. I like you, too, I whispered. But I'm scared, David. I just got out of a terrible marriage. I'm only starting to heal. I don't know if I'm ready for something new. He nodded with understanding. I'm not rushing you. I can wait, as long as it takes. I just wanted you to know I'm here. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be right beside you. We looked at each other, and the air between us felt charged. Then David leaned in and kissed me, gently, carefully, asking for permission. And I kissed him back. For the first time in years, I felt that I truly mattered to someone. Not as a wife who was supposed to cook and clean. Not as an employee who was supposed to finish tasks. As a woman. Just Margaret, with all my fears, scars, and hopes. When we pulled away, David smiled. Don't rush your answer. Just think about it, okay? I nodded, and we returned to work, but the atmosphere in the office had changed. Lighter. Almost happy. That night, I lay awake for a long time, thinking about David, the way he looked at me, the way his hand felt around mine, that kiss. And I realized I wanted to try. I wanted to give myself a chance to be happy again. Not in a year. Not in 6 months. Now. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. David was already there. He was always the first to come in. When he saw me, a flicker of concern crossed his face. Good morning, he said carefully. Morning, I replied, walking toward him. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. And, he asked, his voice suddenly tense. And I want to try. Let's try, David. Slowly, no rush. But I want to do this. The smile that appeared on his face was one of the most genuine and beautiful I'd ever seen. Then let me take you on a date. A real one, not a business lunch. Tonight? I'd love to, I said, smiling. And you know what? At that moment, I truly felt alive. Not surviving. Not merely existing. Living, with hope, with joy, with the anticipation of something good. 6 months had passed since I arrived in Los Angeles, half of my probationary year, and I was certain I'd make it. I had a goal, a team that supported me, and a man who believed in me. But one more test was waiting, the most unexpected one. Our first date was both simple and perfect. David took me to a small Italian restaurant in Santa Monica that served the best pasta in the city. We sat on the outdoor terrace, listening to the ocean waves and talking about everything and nothing. He told funny stories from his life. I shared memories from my childhood. We laughed, sipped wine, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at ease. After dinner, we walked along the pier. David took my hand, and it felt so natural, as if we'd been doing it forever. You know, he said, stopping and looking out at the ocean, when Samuel told me he had a niece who would become the new owner of the company, I was worried. I imagined some spoiled girl who knew nothing about business and would just get in the way. But then you arrived. And you were nothing like that. You're strong, smart, hardworking. You learn fast and aren't afraid to admit when you don't know something. And I think I fell for you by the second week. I looked at him in surprise. The second week? You didn't even show it. Because I was afraid, he said with a soft laugh. Afraid it would be unprofessional, that you'd think I was taking advantage of the situation. But the more I got to know you, the harder it was to stay quiet. I leaned against him, and we stood there, holding each other, listening to the waves. In that moment, I knew I wasn't afraid to open up anymore. I wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. Because David wasn't Victor. He didn't try to control me or make me dependent. He accepted me as I was. The next 2 months were like a dream. We worked together during the day and spent the evenings together, going to movies, concerts, or just walking around the city. He introduced me to his friends. I told him everything about my past. He listened without interrupting, without judgment, just listening and holding my hand. Everyone at the office noticed the change between us, but no one said anything negative. In fact, Michelle winked at me one day and whispered, "You two look perfect together. David's long overdue for happiness. And you deserve it, too." I smiled. Yes, I did deserve happiness. After everything I'd been through. But life has a way of throwing surprises when everything seems perfect. It happened in my 8th month in America. I was in my office reviewing financial reports when there was a knock on the door. Robert, the head of legal, walked in looking serious. "Margaret, we need to talk," he said. "We've got a problem." I set the papers aside. "What kind of problem?" "A man has come forward challenging Mr. Miller's will. He claims to be his son, and says he has a right to the inheritance." My heart sank. His son? But Samuel was never married. He had no children. "That's why it's complicated," Robert replied. "But this man has provided documents, a birth certificate listing Samuel Miller as the father. Of course, we can't do a DNA test now that he's gone, but on paper, the documents look legitimate. He's demanding a review of the will and half the inheritance." Half? That would mean losing the mansion, the company, everything I'd built over the last 8 months. "Who is this man?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "His name is Mark Johnson. He's 35 and lives in San Diego. He claims his mother had a relationship with Samuel when they were young, became pregnant, but Samuel moved to Los Angeles and never contacted her again. She raised her son alone and passed away 3 years ago. Mark says he learned about Samuel's death from the news, the agency's quite well known, and his passing was covered in the press. He hired lawyers, and now they've filed a claim." I sat there, trying to process it all. 8 months of work, effort, and learning, all of it could collapse. That same day, Jennifer Stone called me. "Margaret, I'm already aware of the situation," Jennifer said. "Robert contacted me. We're going to fight this. We need to verify all the documents that Mark Johnson submitted. They could be forged. He might be a con artist trying to profit from Samuel's death. What if it's true?" I asked quietly. "What if he really is his son?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment. "Then legally, he'd have a right to part of the inheritance. But let's not jump to conclusions. Give me a week. I'll look into everything." That week was one of the hardest of my life. I tried to work, to smile at clients, to act normal, but inside, I was terrified. Terrified of losing everything again. Of going back to where I started. David did everything he could to support me. "No matter what happens," he said, holding me close, "you'll get through it. You've already proven you can rise from nothing. And if you have to do it again, you will. But I believe it won't come to that." A week later, Jennifer came to the office in person. Her face was unreadable. "I've checked the documents," she said, sitting across from me. "The birth certificate is real. I contacted the hospital where Mark Johnson was born and reviewed the archives. Everything matches. His mother did list Samuel Miller as the father. But here's the interesting part, Samuel never acknowledged it. He never paid child support, never contacted the child, never mentioned him. Maybe he just didn't know?" I suggested. "That's exactly what I checked next," Jennifer said, opening a folder. "I found a private investigator who worked for Samuel 30 years ago. It turns out Mark's mother did claim to be pregnant by him. Samuel arranged a paternity test. They were rare at the time but available. The result was negative. He wasn't the father. She lied to get money from a successful businessman. Samuel broke off all contact and never spoke to her again." I exhaled in relief. So Mark Johnson isn't his son? Biologically, no, Jennifer confirmed. But there's still a problem. The birth certificate lists Samuel Miller as the father. Formally, that gives Mark grounds to claim inheritance. We have to prove in court that the paternity test conducted 30 years ago was valid. Luckily, I found copies of the test results in the investigator's archives. So we can contest it? I asked, feeling hope return. Yes. But it will be a legal battle. It could take 2 or 3 months. Until it's resolved, part of the assets might be temporarily frozen. You'll need to be ready for that. I nodded. Court again. But this time, I wasn't that helpless woman sitting in a courtroom watching everything slip away. I was Margaret Carter, the owner of a successful real estate agency. And I wasn't going to give up. The trial began 2 weeks later. Mark Johnson was a tall man with a hard stare and a confident demeanor. His lawyers were aggressive and relentless. They tried to paint a picture of Samuel as a man who abandoned a pregnant woman and of me as a distant relative trying to steal what belonged to a rightful heir. The first hearing was brutal. I sat there, hands clasped, listening as Mark's attorney spoke passionately about how a poor single mother had raised her son alone, how Samuel had supposedly ignored them, and how unfair it was that some woman from England had inherited everything. Jennifer stayed calm and precise. She presented the old paternity test results, proving Samuel was not the biological father. She showed records indicating he had never recognized Mark as his son and submitted testimony from the private investigator who had handled the case decades earlier. Samuel Miller didn't abandon a child, Jennifer said firmly, addressing the judge. He underwent a legitimate test that confirmed he was not the father. Mark Johnson's mother falsified the birth certificate in an attempt to gain financially. My client, Margaret Carter, is the only rightful heir according to a will executed by Mr. Miller, written in sound mind and judgment. Mark's attorneys tried to challenge the validity of a 30-year-old test, claiming the technology was outdated and unreliable. But Jennifer was ready. She called an expert who confirmed that even early DNA testing had a high degree of accuracy. She also produced letters between Samuel and Mark's mother, where she had first demanded money, threatening scandal, and then disappeared after receiving the test results. The proceedings dragged on for nearly 3 months. 3 months of stress, sleepless nights, and constant fear. I kept working, but every day the anxiety grew heavier. What if I lost? What if the judge sided with Mark? David never left my side. Every night, he came over, made dinner, held me when I broke down from exhaustion and fear. "You're the strongest woman I know," he whispered. "You've walked through hell and survived. You'll get through this too." In the 11th month of my life in Los Angeles, the judge finally delivered the verdict. I sat in the courtroom, holding David's hand. Jennifer was beside me, calm and composed. Across the room sat Mark Johnson, his face tense. The judge, an older woman with gray hair and a stern gaze, began to read the verdict. After reviewing all the presented evidence, the court concludes that Samuel Miller is not the biological father of Mark Johnson. The paternity test conducted 30 years ago is recognized as valid. The entry on the birth certificate was made by the plaintiff's mother without Mr. Miller's consent or confirmation. Therefore, Mark Johnson has no legal grounds to claim any part of the inheritance. The will of Samuel Miller remains in full effect. Margaret Carter is recognized as the sole legal heir. Case closed. I don't remember how I left the courtroom. I only remember David hugging me as I broke down crying on his shoulder, from relief, from joy, from the weight of it all finally lifting. "You won," he whispered, kissing the top of my head. "You did it, Margaret. You made it." Jennifer shook my hand. "Congratulations. It's official now. The inheritance is fully yours. You can finally live in peace." But I didn't want to just live in peace. I wanted to make a difference. The next day, I gathered the team in the office. I want to thank all of you, I began. This past year has been the hardest and most incredible of my life. You taught me, supported me, believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And I've realized something important. Samuel didn't leave me this inheritance just for me to enjoy it. He wanted me to use it wisely, to help others the way he helped me. That's why I've decided to start a foundation. Everyone looked at each other in surprise. A foundation to help women who've gone through divorce and lost everything, I continued. It will provide housing, job training, and education support, a chance to start over. I know what it's like to end up on the street with nothing. I don't want anyone else to go through that. I'm investing $5 million from my inheritance to start the foundation, and I'll be personally involved in running it. For a moment, there was silence, and then Michelle began to clap. Soon Sarah, Robert, and the rest joined in. David looked at me with pride and love in his eyes. Samuel would be incredibly proud of you, he said softly. I smiled through tears. So am I. A few months passed, and the foundation officially began its work. The first group included 12 women from different states. We helped them find housing, paid for retraining courses, and assisted in job placement. Seeing their faces as they received the keys to their new apartments or their first paychecks, it was priceless. Then, one day, I got a message from Irene back home. Her cafe had grown. She'd hired 2 employees and was planning to open a second location. Thank you, Rita, she wrote. You saved my business. And guess what? Victor came asking for a job as a dishwasher. I hired him. He's changed, quiet, humble, works without complaint. I think life has taught him a lot. I smiled as I read the letter. Victor had finally learned his lesson. Harshly, painfully, but maybe that was exactly what he needed. As for David, one evening, we were sitting on the terrace watching the sunset when he pulled a small box from his pocket. Margaret, he said, kneeling before me, I know we've only known each other a little over a year. I know your past was hard. But I love you. I want to be with you, to support you, to laugh with you, to build a future together. Will you marry me? I looked at him, at the diamond ring, at his hopeful, loving eyes, and realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not afraid to open up, not afraid to trust. Because David wasn't Victor. He saw me, the real me. Yes, I said, smiling through tears. Yes, I will. He slipped the ring onto my finger and kissed me, and at that moment, I knew, my life hadn't ended that night on a park bench. It had just begun. The wedding took place 6 months later, a small, cozy ceremony in the garden of my mansion. Irene came, I paid for her ticket and stay. The whole office team was there. Maria cried with joy as if I were her own daughter. Jennifer Stone was among the guests too, the woman who had found me at my lowest and changed everything. I stood in a simple yet elegant white dress, holding a bouquet of white roses, looking at David, the man who accepted me with all my scars and fears, who lifted me when I fell, who celebrated with me when I rose. I promise to love you always, he said, holding my hands. In joy and in sorrow, in wealth and in hardship. You walked through hell and came out stronger. And I'm proud to stand by you for the rest of my life. I promise to be honest, open, and loving, I replied. To build a life with you based on trust and respect. You've shown me that love doesn't have to hurt, that it can heal. And I'm grateful to you for that. We kissed under the applause of our guests, and it was the happiest moment of my life. After the wedding, life went on. The agency continued to grow. The foundation expanded. Within a year, we had helped 82 women start new lives. I met with each of them personally, listened to their stories, offered advice. Every time I saw their hopeful eyes, I remembered myself, that version of me sitting on a cold park bench, convinced her life was over. How wrong I had been. One morning, almost 2 years after I'd arrived in Los Angeles, I stood on the balcony of my home, holding a cup of coffee. The sun was just rising over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold. David was still asleep in our bedroom. We'd gone to bed late after celebrating another successful deal. I looked out at the city below, at the ocean in the distance, at my red Ferrari in the garage. And I thought about how far I had come. From a homeless woman digging through trash cans, to a millionaire, a successful businesswoman, the wife of a loving man. You know what the most important thing I've learned in these 2 years is? That life can change in a single second. One conversation. One meeting. Jennifer could have walked past me on that bench. Samuel could have left his money to charity. David could have stayed silent about his feelings. But they didn't. And because of that, my life changed. Yet what matters even more is that I changed my life myself. I could have turned down Jennifer's offer out of fear. I could have refused to learn, to try, to fight in court. I could have stayed a victim, blaming Victor, fate, the world. But I made a different choice. I chose to fight. To learn. To believe in myself, even when it was terrifying. And that made all the difference. As for Victor, the last I heard about him was a year ago. Irene told me he'd opened a small auto repair shop on the edge of the city. He worked alone, lived modestly, quietly. He never tried to reach out again. And you know what? I honestly wish him well. Because holding on to resentment is like carrying a stone in your heart. And I've freed my heart, for love, for joy, for life. My phone rang. The number was unfamiliar but American. I answered. Miss Carter, a woman's voice said, trembling slightly. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the women your foundation helped last year. I just wanted to thank you. A year ago, I was living in my car with my daughter after a divorce. I had no job, no money, no hope. Now I'm a store manager, I rent a good apartment, and my daughter started school. We're doing well, thanks to you. You gave me a chance when I thought I had none. Tears welled up in my eyes. Catherine, you did it all yourself, I said softly. We just gave you a start. You did the rest. No, she said, her voice breaking. You showed me it was possible to rise again. That life doesn't end after a divorce. That you can still be strong when you feel empty. Thank you. From my heart. We said goodbye, and I stood there on the balcony, crying tears of happiness. This was why Samuel Miller had left me his inheritance. Not so I could live in luxury, but so I could help others. So I could give hope to those who had lost theirs. David came out to the balcony and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Good morning, Mrs. Harrison, he whispered, kissing my neck. I smiled. Mrs. Harrison. I still wasn't used to my new last name. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. What are you thinking about? How lucky I am, I said. About the incredible road I've traveled, and everything still ahead. He turned me toward him, looking into my eyes. You know what's amazing? What? The best part is still ahead of us. We're just getting started, Margaret. And he was right. If this story touched your heart and you want to help us continue creating stories like this, click the super thanks button, the little heart with the $sign under the video. Every time you do, you help us share stories that inspire, comfort, and remind people that even from the darkest place, you can rise again. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most. Was it the moment on the bench, when Margaret almost lost hope? Or the meeting with Jennifer, which changed everything? Or maybe the moment she decided to help Victor, despite everything he'd done? Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new stories about people who faced hardships and found the strength to change their lives. Like this video if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, that falling isn't the end, but a chance to rise stronger than before. And before you go, watch the story we've left here on the screen, about a woman who lost everything in one day and found the strength to start again. I'm sure it will touch your heart and maybe even change how you see your own life. Remember, your story isn't over yet. The best chapter may still be ahead.